There's a race most people never signed up for, yet almost everyone is running. It doesn't start with a gunshot, and it doesn't end with a finish line. It starts quietly, maybe with a school report card, a promotion, a LinkedIn notification. Slowly, life turns into a sequence of targets and deadlines, a spreadsheet of expectations. Success becomes a checklist. Productivity turns into morality. Max Weber saw this coming. His analysis of the Protestant work ethic showed that work, once a necessity, became a spiritual virtue. Rest became a silent guilt, and constant motion a badge of worth. The idea that busy equals good began to shape Western consciousness in profound ways. People stopped asking why they were running. They only knew that stopping wasn't an option. And so we internalized the race, not as a choice, but as the natural order of things. Day after day, we equate our sense of self with how much we do, how fast we move, how much we achieve. But where are we really going? The tragedy of this invisible race is not just that it exhausts us, but that it disguises itself as purpose. The structure is so normalized, so deeply embedded in the fabric of our societies, that questioning it feels almost immoral. If you don't want to hustle, people ask what's wrong with you. If you choose rest, you're seen as lazy. This invisible pressure doesn't shout, it whispers. It creeps into the way we plan our lives, the way we talk about success, even the way we love. The more productive someone is, the more they're admired. The more overloaded they are, the more they're respected. As if exhaustion were a currency of value. Weber understood that this wasn't just economics. It was a kind of modern spirituality. A religion without gods, where work replaces worship and output becomes salvation. It's no longer enough to live. You must justify your existence by doing. Being isn't the goal. Producing is. This logic bleeds into everything. People apologize for taking breaks. Vacations come with guilt. Even free time must be used well. You can't just sit and think. You must read something productive, learn a new skill, optimize your body, monetize your hobby. Life turns into a constant performance review, and you're both the employee and the supervisor. We start to evaluate ourselves not by who we are, but by what we've accomplished lately. A quiet day becomes an existential crisis. And this isn't just about work, it's about identity. We wear busyness like a medal. We brag about how much we're juggling, how little we sleep, how many emails we've answered. Behind it all, there's a silent fear. If I'm not producing, I'm disappearing. And in that fear, the race continues. Quiet, invisible, and relentless. What makes this race especially dangerous is that it's designed to feel personal. You think it's your fault that you're tired, that you just need better habits, more discipline, a stronger mindset. But what if the system itself is broken? What if the very definition of success we're chasing was created to keep us running, not towards fulfillment, but away from ourselves? The invisible race convinces you that there's no alternative, that life must be hard, busy, optimized. But behind this narrative is a deeper truth. The moment we begin to question the race, it begins to lose power over us. It's not weakness to step off the treadmill. It's wisdom. The question we must dare to ask is not how to run faster, but whether we were ever meant to run at all. There's a cruel irony woven into the fabric of modern life. We are more productive than ever, yet many of us feel more stagnant than ever. We answer hundreds of emails, attend endless meetings, juggle countless tasks, and still lie awake at night feeling strangely unaccomplished. David Graeber called this out with piercing clarity in his work Bullshit Jobs. He exposed a hidden truth of modern capitalism. An alarming number of jobs today serve no real purpose. They exist not because they add value to society, but because the system demands people stay busy. Graeber wasn't attacking workers. He was defending them. He saw how intelligent, capable people were trapped in positions that drained their spirit while contributing nothing meaningful to the world. The worst part? These jobs are often wrapped in corporate language that makes them sound important. But when stripped of the jargon, what's left is emptiness, a daily performance of productivity without substance. In this strange new landscape, busyness becomes theater. People spend their lives inside organizations where metrics are worshipped but meaning is lost. They attend strategy meetings about strategies, revise documents that no one reads, and spend hours maintaining systems that exist only to justify themselves. The illusion of progress is maintained by constant motion, but it's a motion without direction. It feels like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up, not to take you somewhere, but to ensure you never stop. This isn't just inefficient, it's spiritually exhausting. Because deep down, many people know their energy is being spent, but their soul is not being fed. There's a quiet desperation behind the smiles and polite office banter. An unspoken question that haunts the corporate corridors. Is this all there is? And when that question is ignored for too long, it becomes a kind of inner silence. Numbness disguised as professionalism. The tragedy deepens when identity gets fused to this machinery. When someone asks, "So, what do you do?" we rarely answer with what we love or who we are. We answer with our job title, as if that single line could capture our essence. And when that title is tied to a role that feels meaningless, we begin to internalize that meaninglessness. We start to believe we are what the system reflects back to us. If our work is empty, we must be too. That's how the illusion becomes internalized. You're not just doing a job you don't believe in. You begin to doubt your own value. And the more exhausted you feel, the more you blame yourself. You think you need more motivation, more grit, more hustle. But maybe what you really need is less noise, less illusion, less pretending. We're conditioned to think that the answer is always more. But what if the answer is something entirely different? What if the real courage lies in asking whether this system deserves our energy in the first place? Graeber's insight was radical not because it was complicated, but because it was obvious. Obvious in the way things become once they're spoken aloud. The world is full of people working jobs they secretly know shouldn't exist. Entire careers are built around maintaining appearances, avoiding scrutiny, and ticking boxes that lead nowhere. But the system keeps going because questioning it feels dangerous. If you say your job is pointless, it's seen as a personal failure, not a systemic flaw. So people stay quiet. They keep playing the game, fearing what might happen if they stop. But what if that fear is the very tool the system uses to survive? The illusion of progress is powerful because it keeps us compliant. It convinces us that fatigue equals worth, and that discomfort is just the price of being a responsible adult. But maybe adulthood isn't about surrendering to a broken structure. Maybe it's about reclaiming the right to ask, does any of this make sense? And if not, what are we willing to do about it? In a world obsessed with accumulation, the question, "Who are you?" has quietly been replaced by, "What do you have?" Status, possessions, titles, accolades. These have become the currency of identity. Erich Fromm, in his groundbreaking work, To Have or to Be, warned us about this dangerous shift. He argued that modern society had moved away from valuing authentic existence, the raw, unfiltered experience of simply being alive, and toward a mindset where identity is built on ownership. And the consequence is devastating. When your sense of self is tied to what you possess, you become fragile. Your worth becomes dependent on external validation, on what others can see, measure, and approve. Suddenly, the soul is no longer something to cultivate, but something to decorate. We become products of ourselves, polished, performative, and painfully disconnected from our inner truth. The logic of the system is seductive. It tells us that if we work hard enough, earn enough, achieve enough, we will finally become someone. But the reality is more cruel. The more we chase external markers of value, the more we lose touch with who we were before we started running. Individuality becomes performance. Social media intensifies this illusion. Every post, Every story becomes a curated proof of worth. We learn to pose instead of feel, to display instead of reflect. Fromm saw this as a kind of spiritual alienation. We become strangers to our own inner lives. Our fears, desires, dreams, they're edited out to make room for productivity and polish. We are taught to market ourselves, as if being human were a brand strategy. And beneath all the branding, something quiet and vital starts to fade. Authenticity, presence, and the deep joy of being rather than performing. The danger is that this culture of having doesn't just change how we see ourselves, it changes how we see others. People become competitors, obstacles, tools. Relationships become transactional. Intimacy becomes conditional on appearances. In a world where worth is tied to image, vulnerability becomes a liability. We hide our struggles, disguise our doubts, and smile through the exhaustion. But the more we conform to the expectations of this system, the more invisible we become to ourselves. Fromm believed that true freedom begins when we stop chasing what we don't need and start asking who we really are without the mask. But that kind of self-inquiry is hard in a world where stillness feels like failure and introspection feels like indulgence. We are programmed to move, to consume, to strive. Yet what if the deepest act of rebellion is to stop and simply be? In a system designed to reward conformity, individuality becomes an act of resistance. Choosing authenticity over image is not just a personal decision, it's a radical one. Fromm didn't offer easy solutions, but he did offer a vision. A society where people are valued not for what they have, but for who they are. A society where relationships are based on depth, not display. Where work serves life, not the other way around. But to get there, we must first see how deeply we've internalized the opposite. The fear of not being enough is the engine that keeps the rat race alive. But that fear isn't natural. It's manufactured. When we begin to see that, we begin to reclaim our power. The shift from having to being is not a small one. It is the foundation of a new way of living, one that doesn't depend on the applause of others, but on the quiet, unwavering truth of who we are beneath all the noise. Status has become the modern soul's compass. It tells us whether we matter, whether we're seen, whether we're winning in a game we never consciously agreed to play. Alain de Botton, in his reflections on status anxiety, unmasked a truth that most of us live but rarely name. That much of what we do, what we strive for, what we fear, is not about survival, but about recognition. We want to be valued, not just in private, but publicly. We want proof that our lives mean something, and in today's world, that proof often comes through comparison. Not who you are, but who you are in relation to someone else. And so, even without realizing it, we begin to measure our worth through other people's lives. Their promotions, their vacations, their curated moments online become silent accusations. Why not you? Why not yet? Social media has made this worse, of course. Not because it invented comparison, but because it industrialized it. Every scroll is a mirror held up to our insecurities. We see filtered versions of others and compare them to our unfiltered reality. But the worst part isn't that we're envious. It's that we begin to believe we're falling behind. Behind in success. Behind in beauty. Behind in life. And in a culture where visibility equals value, being unnoticed feels like erasure. De Botton understood that status is not about money alone. It's about meaning. It's about wanting to be important in the eyes of others. And so we chase markers of success not because we deeply want them, but because we fear being forgotten. We fear being average. We fear being no one. And so, the rat race continues, driven not by desire, but by dread. The tragedy is that the more we chase status, the more hollow it becomes. The high of being seen is always fleeting. There's always someone with more. More followers, more beauty, more success. The mountain has no peak, only new levels of inadequacy. And yet, we keep climbing, thinking the next milestone will finally make us feel complete. But it doesn't. It can't. Because the root of the pain isn't lack of achievement. It's the belief that we are only as worthy as our position in the social hierarchy. De Botton invites us to question this cruel logic. Why do we let others decide our value? Why do we outsource our self-worth to strangers? What would happen if we defined success on our own terms? Not in public applause, but in private peace? That shift may not be loud or flashy, but it might be the most liberating act of all. To escape the tyranny of comparison, we have to confront something deeper, the fear of being invisible. Not invisible in a literal sense, but emotionally invisible. Unseen, unloved, irrelevant. This is the fear that fuels the race for attention, for status, for validation. And yet, in chasing visibility, we often lose ourselves. We become projections, personas, avatars. The irony is brutal. In trying so hard to be seen, we become less real. De Botton doesn't suggest we abandon ambition or recognition entirely, but he does urge us to be more conscious of why we want what we want. Not all desires are ours. Some are implanted. Some are survival strategies in a culture that confuses noise with meaning. Maybe the answer is not to shine brighter, but to step into the shadows willingly, to embrace invisibility, not as failure, but as freedom. In a world obsessed with being seen, perhaps the most radical act is to become deeply, unapologetically yourself, even if no one is watching. Escaping the rat race doesn't mean abandoning responsibility, rejecting ambition, or disappearing into the forest. It means something far more subtle and far more courageous. It means choosing to live consciously within a system designed to make you live unconsciously. Fromm, Graeber, de Botton, Weber, they each, in their own way, warned us that modern life was becoming a machine. A fast, noisy, demanding machine that punishes rest, rewards busyness, and measures success in units of exhaustion. But what if we no longer accept those terms? What if we decide that success is not a finish line, but a feeling? That purpose is not something you chase, but something you create with intention, presence, and care? Leaving the race is not about quitting life. It's about reclaiming it. It's about walking when everyone else is running. It's about choosing meaning over momentum. To begin this shift, we have to confront the voice inside us that whispers, "You're not doing enough." That voice is not ours. It's the echo of a system that feeds on our insecurities. It tells us that rest is laziness, that slowness is weakness, that stillness is failure. But that voice can be unlearned. We can reprogram our minds to recognize a different kind of value, a value that isn't loud, public, or applauded. Time becomes sacred again, not as a resource to be spent efficiently, but as a space to be filled with care. When you step out of the race, you start to ask different questions. Not, how much can I get, but what do I really need? Not, how can I impress, but what truly matters to me? This is not a retreat from life. It is a return to it. A return to depth, to presence, to being. That said, opting out of the race is not easy. The system is persistent. It will guilt you for not optimizing every hour. It will tempt you with metrics, compare you to others, and feed you the illusion that more is always better. But every act of resistance begins small. Maybe it's choosing to rest without guilt. Maybe it's saying no to a promotion that doesn't align with your values. Maybe it's walking away from a job that pays well but kills your spirit. These decisions won't earn you applause. In fact, they may confuse or disappoint others. But the real reward is invisible. It's the quiet return of your own voice. It's the sense of wholeness that begins to bloom when you no longer measure your worth by speed, output, or applause. As Graeber reminds us, meaning isn't found in appearances. It's found in the honesty of what we do and why we do it. And so, we close with a quiet provocation. What if the true victory isn't winning the race, but refusing to run it at all? Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Not because you gave up, but because you woke up. Because you realized that the finish line was a mirage, and the real treasure was the time, the freedom, and the self that were waiting outside the track. Fromm would tell us to choose being over having. De Botton would remind us that the validation we seek from others can never replace the peace that comes from within. Graeber would challenge us to question the work we do and whom it really serves. And Weber's ghost would whisper that perhaps, just perhaps, the spirit of capitalism doesn't have to be our God. We can choose another way. One that is slower, quieter, more human. One where life is not a race to be won, but a journey to be lived, deeply and intentionally.